Welcome to the Pursuers of Peak Performance podcast, the podcast for PTs and fitness business owners to produce more. The pursuit of peak performance is an ongoing process to produce next level results in every aspect. The purpose of this podcast is to share the processes and procedures that peak performers use to produce more. My name is Cody McAuliffe and I'm the founder of the Pursuers of Peak Performance podcast. I see the proverbial bar of the standards within the fitness industry is way too low. My purpose and my passion is to raise that bar so that the fitness industry can live up to its potential. Let's get into the episode. Hey guys, welcome to today's episode of the Pursuers of Peak Performance podcast. Today we're talking all about the pillar of production. Now, production is actually created from our mindset. Our mindset can be the limiting factor with this, with ourselves and with other people. So when we talk about mindset, this is interrelated with production. Production is the outcome that we're looking at achieving. Mindset is how we actually do it. So we want to have that frame of reference going into this episode so that you have the understanding of the outcome that we're looking at achieving is increased production. We're not looking at increased productivity because productivity doesn't necessarily align with output. Output is what we're looking at achieving. We can feel productive and get a shit ton of things done. However, they might not be the right things. We're ultimately trying to increase our output, get the increase in production so that we get the results that we're looking at achieving. So we're very much touching on all of these factors around mindset and production. We talk about the limiting factors of our language, how we can use our language to create any outcome that we're looking at achieving, the integrity wheel, how this comes into play in terms of what creates a shame or a guilt cycle that holds us back long term. We talk about expectations and intentions, how words create our reality, and how they actually highlight that the language that we use creates the outcomes that we're looking at achieving, or alternatively holds us back. So we talk about all of these factors to be able to set you up for success, increase production from optimizing your mindset, and how to be able to do this with other people as well. There's very much in terms of the pillars, there's production, there's personal production, there's other people's production. So if we understand that these factors determine our success and the success of our clients, any other person that we work with, then we understand that this is the foundation for everything that we do. So I'm really excited to be able to share all of these factors with you guys to be able to help you pursue peak performance. So let's get into the episode. Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Pursuers of Peak Performance podcast. Today's episode is going to be 100% centered around the mindset pillar. I'm going to be talking about some important distinctions, differences between language types so that we can create a situation where we get anything that we want. We want to understand that when we're thinking about words, they're the things that give us distinctions. Until we created words, there was no distinctions between one thing and another. One of the great examples of this is in, they did this study where they're comparing how many colors someone in America sees on a palette of paint compared to how many colors someone in Russia sees on the exact same palette. Now, it was exactly the same palette. However, in Russia, there are more colors that people are taught, and there are more distinctions in terms of the variations between those colors. So it meant that there were, I think it was like 40% more colors that the Russians said was on the exact same plate of paint. So it just means that language can then give us a distinction, and that's what creates exactly what we are. And if we see the world through the language that we utilize, the more language that we can understand, that we can see, the greater we can see the world. So what we want to understand is the concept of with language, with words, we can create anything that we want. We speak into existence. When we have an example of the word try, how often when someone says they're going to try something, do they end up doing it? Well, it's not very often, really, is it? The reason why that is because we actually have a stress response and association with that word. So if we were to pick up something, if we were to grab something, I'll get you to do that now, as long as you're not driving or anything. I want you to, even if you are driving, you can still do it. You can grip the steering wheel. I'm going to get you to just grip the steering wheel, and I just want you to feel how much tension on there as you try to turn the wheel, but not actually turn it. So I want you to try, and I want you to be grabbing it as hard as you can, creating all that tenseness, trying to do it, but you can't physically move the wheel. So we're trying to grab something. We're trying to create that tension. And what that does, it creates tension all up our arm, all through our body, because we're having that association of trying. Whereas if we were just to turn that wheel just that little bit, it is so effortless. We can do it with absolute ease. The issue is, as soon as we come up with the frame of reference, I'm going to try to turn that wheel, we instantly create that stress response, which is not just in our head, it's something that changes our physiology. You can feel that tension go through your arm, through your body as you start to try and make that change. That is just one distinction that we have in terms of one piece of language. If we understand that that has the power in terms of every single piece of language that we use, then we want to start to become so much more aware of our language that we're using, so that we can start to optimize our word choices, so that we can have those word choices aligned with the outcomes that we're looking at achieving. Ultimately, we have a language which is empowering for us, which means it's aligned with our goals, which means it's going to take us in the direction that we want to go. And then there's language which is disempowering, which is not aligned with our goals. It's not wrong or right. If we add a wrong or right aspect to it, then we create judgment of whether we're doing the right thing. And then if we do the wrong thing, by definition, we often have the feelings of guilt, shame, things of that nature, where we start to get into that negative cycle, which compounds and creates this increased stress for us again by doing that. We want to create frames of reference utilizing language so that it creates the outcome that we're looking. So we want to make sure that it is in alignment with our goals, because ultimately certain actions are going to create certain outcomes. So if we have that as a concept, then we're like, all right, cool. That just means I can, number one, be aware of my language choices so that I can then become aware, so that I can then optimize them to ensure that I am aligned, utilizing my language to move in the direction that I'm looking at achieving, to ensure that I have that empowering language so that I can then move forward in everything that I do. So we want to understand that concept of words to reality. Now, we want to touch on those two things that we talked about again a moment ago now, which is shame and guilt. We want to make the distinction between the two differences between those two things. Shame, we'll start with guilt. That would make more sense. Guilt is very much behavior-based. The behavior that I took is not good enough. Shame is identity-based. I am not good enough. So you can see how that frame of reference can instantly create something that holds us back. And the best analogy that I can use is when we're in that kind of state, what we're doing is it's almost like we've put a 20-kilo weight vest on and we're just starting to walk around it. And then if we continually go in that cycle, that weight continually increases and tends to hold us back until we stop moving forward. And then eventually we can have a breakdown. That is the cycle that we go through in terms of going through a shame or a guilt cycle. Over time, it slowly just breaks us down and breaks us down. So we want to have this cycle create an empowering frame of reference for us. If we have it creating that empowering frame of reference, then we're moving in the direction that is going to be aligned with our goals, which is the direction that we want to go. If we're constantly in misalignment, then often what we do is we create that expectation of a specific outcome. What happens when we create an expectation of an outcome is we're often we often don't achieve that. That's just how it is. If we consistently set goals and we're not aligned with those things, if we're not in integrity in ourselves and we're not aligned with working towards that direction, then that becomes stressful for us. It becomes something that we start to punish ourselves for. If we look at that shame and that guilt mindset and that focus and that cycle that it creates, what we're psychologically doing is we're psychologically punishing ourselves for either not being good enough or not taking action that is good enough. So that actually holds us back. It creates a frame of reference of I'm already punishing myself. That means I don't need to learn from this situation. I don't need to learn and improve going forward. I am not good enough. I'm punishing myself already. I've closed off all opportunity to be able to learn from this situation. Is this something that we want in our life? Well, it's ultimately a choice. We want to see that as a choice so that we can determine, right, is this the outcome that I'm looking at achieving? Is this aligned with the direction that I want to be heading? Because ultimately, it doesn't matter if you have the intention, the expectation of getting to Hawaii from Australia. There's no way that you're going to be doing that if you don't have some way to be able to get there. If you can't take a plane or a boat, you're trying to drive your car there. Well, that's just not aligned with getting there. It's as simple as that. So we want to ensure, all right, what's the path that I'm on? What is the direction that I am currently heading? Is that aligned with the outcome that I'm looking at achieving? Because the majority of the time when I talk to people, whenever it's business coaching, within any kind of coaching at all, if you're not where you want to be, there's only two reasons. Number one, you're doing the wrong work, or number two, you're lying about doing the wrong work. Because ultimately, if you knew and it was something that was that important to you, you would already be there. So ultimately, it's one of those two things. So if we can understand that, then we can observe that, we can become aware of that. We can go, all right, cool. Are the actions that I am taking aligned with the outcome that I'm looking at achieving? If they're not, that's not right, that's not wrong, that's just what it is. It's just becoming aware of that and going, okay, cool. I can accept that is the history. Now I can learn from this. Now I can move forward. Now I can do all of these things so that I can then become in alignment. Because the limitation that most people have is, oh, I should be doing this, but I'm not. I should be working towards my goals. I should be doing more marketing. I had a business coaching call today. I should be doing this. I should be doing this. I should be creating a marketing campaign. I should be doing that. As soon as we get into that, we're creating a judgment of ourselves. We're judging ourselves for what we think we should have done based on setting an expectation of what someone else has done, which is ultimately that comparison. When have you compared yourself to someone else and that made you feel amazing without putting them down as well? Because instantly, as soon as you compare yourself, there's certain times where you think you're better than someone else. And then there's a lot of the other times where that you think they're better than you. And how does that feel? Generally, it doesn't feel very good. So what we want to do is we want to create a frame of reference where that is not part of our language vocabulary. We can start to remove that as much as possible. It's still going to creep in at certain points. However, if we have the frame of reference of I'm going to choose when I'm going to judge things and be aware of that and limit that, then that's going to become so much more empowering for us, because it's like taking off that weight vest. Because as soon as we put that weight vest on, we hold on to it, and then it's so much harder for the rest of the day. And if you've ever done any kind of exercise with a weight vest, you know that it's like super hard when you do it, but then as soon as you take it off, everything just becomes so effortless. This is what we want to create in our lives, because ultimately we've created all of these things where we've been out of integrity with ourselves. We've been shaming ourselves. We've been guilting ourselves because of the actions that we've been taking. So we've subconsciously been taking all of these extra weights and all of this extra thing onto us. So if we could just let go of that, then that's going to create a situation where so much more becomes available. How amazing would that be? How would you feel if you felt like you just had that weight lifted off you? And this is what I hear a lot of the time, especially when I do the in-person events. It's just like when you walk out of that and when you've had that transformative experience, you just feel just like on top of the world. You just feel weightless, because what we've done is we've gone through a process to be able to lift that weight off you so that you can dramatically move forward. And then you look back and you're just like, wow, I let that hold me back for so long. That's interesting. It's not bad, because as soon as we have bad, that's a judgment. I want to say, oh, that's interesting. That's a distinction that we can create in terms of removing judgment from anything. That's why we can say, all right, that's interesting. That's fascinating. One of the important distinctions that I give people is when people say, oh, that's frustrating. You can see it as frustrating, or you can see it as fascinating. You can see it as right or wrong, or you can see it as interesting. Hey, that's interesting. That's interesting that you think that way. So what we want to do is we want to create that distinction of removing the language as much as we can of right or wrong, and removing that judgment, and removing that expectation of a specific outcome. Because if we're like, right, I'm gonna try and lose some weight, and I want to lose 10 kilos. Cool. I want to lose 10 kilos in 10 weeks, and you lose 9 kilos in 10 weeks. You feel like you didn't achieve your goal, when the reality of the situation is you lost 9 kilos. That is phenomenal. That is a huge win. However, if you set that expectation of 10 kilos in 10 weeks, well, there's a big opportunity for us to go, I didn't live up to my expectation. Or we can appreciate that huge win of that 9 kilos. And if we have it set up where I have the expectation of getting this 10 kilos in 10 weeks, we give ourselves that permission to have that frame of reference to be able to go, yeah, but you didn't get the goal. You didn't get that 10 kilos. I wanted that 10 kilos. Now, there are some people that can thrive on this. However, the majority of the population over time continually doing this creates that disempowering cycle, creates that shame cycle. I'm not good enough because I didn't get to that 10 kilo goal. And what happens then is they get into that mindset of, fuck it. It's as simple as that. They just get into the fuck it mode and they're like, fuck it, I'm just going to eat whatever. Fuck it, I didn't get to the 10 kilos. What's it worth it? And I see this with contest prep athletes all the time. They're like, all right, I'm going to smash it. I'm going to get it done for stage. I'm going to get it from here. I'm going to get on stage and I'm going to absolutely destroy it. And they get there. There's no focus after. And they're just like, fuck it, it's over. Now I can just do whatever the F I want. So what we want to talk about is understand all of these different distinctions, all of these different things, so that we can then utilize these as tools to be able to apply it to any situation so that we can then dramatically move forward. All of these distinctions are just different tools that we can utilize at different points in our life. Does that mean that we absolutely never use words like good or bad? We can use them if we understand them as a tool. If we can then remove that judgment from those things, we can say good or bad all the time. However, it just creates that element of judgment, which over time can have a disempowering frame of reference for us. So if we can create that frame of reference where it's free from judgment, it's going to be so much more powerful for us. So it means that we can then use that tool of that word choice to create the thing that we want in our life. Does that make sense, guys? Can you kind of understand how language can very much create anything that we want in life? It can be the source of our limitation, or it can be the source of our growth. It can be either of those two things. Ultimately, the choice is ours. And if you look at the language that I use in terms of an extra distinction, you notice how I say choice. What's another word that I could use in that case? Another word would be decide. However, if we look at the word decide, if we break that down, D-E-S-C-I-D-E, well, what does the prefix side mean? Well, if we look at other words that are like that, what other words do we have? Genocide, suicide, homicide. Decide is creating the death of all other opportunities. Now, again, this is a tool. We can utilize that to understand. We can decide on certain things. However, the majority of the time we want to make it as a choice, because if we look back and we'll make to decide on something when we're 5 years old, is that going to be an accurate decision to make, or is it going to be an empowering decision to make? If we decide when we're 5 years old that we're afraid of the dark, is that an accurate frame of reference? Is that a founded fear? If we decide it at that point and we get to 29 years of age, 30 years of age, 45 years of age, and we decided that when we were 5 years old and that is still part of our life, is that going to limit us? Yes. So we want to understand that when we're deciding things, we need to be careful when we're doing that, because we're killing off all opportunity. And at different points in our life, we have different levels of understanding of life. So that's going to progress. That's going to change over a period of time. If we have that frame of reference, then we can start to then create what we want in life. So we want to be careful when we utilize words like decide. If we have a choice, then we're constantly open to change. We can consistently change our direction. We can consistently align ourselves, align our actions with other opportunities, and consistently stay open to every single aspect of things that we do. Is that more powerful and more empowering for us than deciding and closing off absolutely all opportunity to the things that we do? Again, this is just the power of words. We don't pay conscious attention to all of the language choices that we make, and then we don't see what that means long term. When I see someone talking to me and I see their language choices, I can pick up what their thought processes are going on in their brain based on their language choices, based on the limitations